Now, lots of interesting discussion points to get ahead. I'd like to open my account this morning with a phone-in, inspired really by some of you initially. There's the poll today, which suggests that record numbers of us want to rejoin the EU. 65% want a new referendum, which kind of begs the question, where does that leave Labour leader Keir Starmer, head of Her Majesty's opposition, whether he's scored a huge own goal by promising that Labour is going to make Brexit work when the majority of voters, according to this poll, have had enough of the whole damn thing. You see, over the last few days, more and more of you, and it's been quite telling through the LBC message boards, more and more of you appear to blame Brexit for many, if not all of this country's current difficulties. During chats over the last week about the NHS and about energy bills, you kept referring to our decision to leave the EU back in 2016 as the elephant in the room, the elephant that people don't want to speak about. The government's own forecaster, the Office for Budget Responsibility, that considers Brexit to be an economic shock. We know that. The Centre of European Reform, John Springford, he reckons our government has lost around £40 billion in tax revenues by year end in June because of Brexit. And those of you who thought that Brexit, or thought of Brexit only in terms, say, of closing our borders to uncontrolled migration, well, I would suggest that you might feel let down by what's followed, both in terms of the huge rise in non-EU migrants coming to this country, as well as the steady stream of refugees and asylum seekers. 46,000 have crossed the English Channel over the past 12 months, which kind of puts paid to the Tory promise that they were going to stop all of that. And all of these things, I guess, may explain a growing dissatisfaction with Brexit, because poll after poll in the last 12 months or so has been showing increasing numbers of Brits are fed up with it. The one in The Independent today suggests that, 2 years after we transitioned out of the European Union, nearly 2/3 of you, 65%, support a referendum on rejoining. We didn't leave the single market, of course, until the 31st of December 2020, so that's 2 years, 2 days ago. But in that brief period, there appears to be a sea change of opinion. The survey found 54% of you now think Brexit was the wrong decision. That's up from 46% last year. The number who want the vote, 65%. That's up from 55% this time last year. 56% now think leaving the EU has made the economy worse. That's up from 44% a year ago. And half of us think it's made the UK's ability to control its own borders worse, and that's gone up from 43% to 50%. Damning stuff, I would suggest. It should be acknowledged, I guess, that Remainers did warn us about all of this in the run-up to the referendum. Why we chose to ignore those warnings is a fascinating question, but it's not one I want to put to you today. I'm interested primarily in what you make of this poll, whether you're surprised by the growing consensus that we need to have another vote. And I'm also intrigued as to where you think it leaves Keir Starmer, because, I mean, he says, as leader of the opposition, he's essentially welded a future Labour government to the notion of making Brexit work when there's this growing consensus that you can't make Brexit work. Only a couple of weeks ago, Starmer said rejoining the single market wouldn't boost UK growth and would only create years of uncertainty. Instead, Starmer would seek to improve the post-departure deal agreed by Boris Johnson. Trade has gone down, he says, because the deal we've got is not a very good deal. But that's Starmer's direct quote. But like so many Brexiteer types before him, Starmer, who, of course, when he was a Brexit shadow secretary, was in favour of a new vote on the Withdrawal Act, he's now refusing to explain why we can't have one to rejoin the single market. And what's more, of course, he's vowed not to revisit the idea of rejoining, even if in the future it appeared trade barriers with the EU were harming growth. I mean, when you're 20% ahead in the polls, I would have thought the two issues that you would really try and avoid is one, saying that you're going to make Brexit work, and the other is getting caught up in the gender culture wars that are out there, because I think you're on a hiding to nothing with both. And what do we make of this poll? Are you part of that 65%? Have you changed your mind about Brexit? And do we think we're ever going to see another EU referendum? How long will we have to wait? 0345 6060 973 is the number. God, just remembering Nigel Farage on my old TV show saying, I think it was in 2017, that he favoured a second referendum, I think at the time, to clarify what Brexit was. I'm going to turn for guidance first to Anna Soubry, who, of course, a former Conservative minister who left the party in 2019 over its anti-EU agenda and has committed herself ever since to change. First in the Independent Group, now known as Change UK. Good morning and a Happy New Year to you, Anna.
Happy New Year.
Now, I'm going to ask you, you're not going to be smug, because there's probably nothing to be smug about, but are you surprised by the poll?
I am. I have to say, Matthew, and forgive me, I'm rather cynical. about the number of people who actually want another vote. That's not my sense. I live in North Leicestershire, and just amongst family, friends, just out and about, chatting as you do, I don't get that at all.
Just so you know, a colleague spoke to Peter Mandelson, and he is of a similar view. He doesn't believe in the poll, but as I've been stressing, polls are the principal indicator we have of public opinion.
Absolutely. What I do get the real sense of is that people now know and realise that actually Brexit was based on lies, basically, and they were, people with overwhelmingly with the best will in the world, wanted to do the right thing by their country, and people who voted Leave believed that they were doing the right thing.
Yes, they did.
For the country, yes, and they did. And people like me get really quite upset. When I say upset, I mean quite angry when other people say things about tell me what I think, which really hacks me up. Not being told what I think, I know what I think, but that we somehow were rude about people who voted for Leave. Not at all. It's the leaders of the Leave campaign that I turn my attention to, because I think they told lies. I think they tricked good, honest, decent British people into voting for something that they could never deliver on. And that it was, as I say, based on these lies, one of which, of course, was that there were these uplit, what were they, sunny uplands?
Sunny uplands,
that's
yes,
it.
That's right, yeah.
That's it. Anyway, everything was going to be better. And what people are finding is, of course, that Brexit has been bad for Britain.
Was it a distraction?
Of course, it's not the only thing.
Was the whole thing a kind of distraction that you say all our problems are coming from over there in the EU, and in that statement you divert attention from all the problems that may very well be caused by you at home?
I don't think, if I may say, I don't think it's that. That's a part of it. I think that there are many factors. So one, there had been for a long, long time, decades, this drumbeat that all our woes, as you rightly say, were the responsibility of the European Union. And politicians and political parties of all colours, it was very easy just to blame the EU. And we had all these stupid stories about bendy bananas, and the EU became the big demon. And actually, when you drilled into it, that was a load of old nonsense. It just wasn't true. The problem was there weren't that many politicians who were brave enough to say, bendy bananas, that is a lie. That is not true. That is fake news. Call it what you want. But it's not true. And no disrespect, not obviously, big respect to you in LBC. There weren't enough people in the media who had the courage
Totally agree.
But the thing that what Brexit was largely based on was that there were millions of people who were really hacked off, and they felt totally unrepresented. If you live in a safe Labour seat, and if you live in a safe Labour ward, and I can only speak about my home city, which is Nottingham, by and large, you had an MP and councillors who had a job for life, and you felt, didn't matter how you voted, you got the same old lot in, and they didn't fix the bus stop. They didn't clear up the litter. They didn't do all these things. And so it was your opportunity to pretty much, stick two fingers up at the establishment and actually say, you know what, in this referendum, my vote counts just the same as your vote, Matthew Wright, you, Anna Soubry, this person, that person. I can actually make a difference to my life. And they were then told all this nonsense that their lives would be better if they left the EU. And the real tragedy is no government, no politician has actually talked about those underlying causes and issues and actually looked at how we can solve that disenchantment.
Which brings me to the kind of question that's forefront in my mind, which is Brexit was a non-party political issue that seems to be becoming a party political issue, except for the fact that Keir Starmer seems to be on the wrong side. That the Tory party seems fully committed to Brexit. Labour, you might say that Labour should be keeping an eye on the poll. They should be reading the room, and the room is saying, we don't like Brexit. So why on earth, if you're the leader of the opposition, would you choose to align with the same basic principles of the current government and align yourself against what the room is saying? 65% want to rejoin, or referendum at least.
Yeah, well, as I say, I'm cynical about that. Look, it's not my job to defend Keir
Anna, would you accept there is a growing consensus for a second referendum? Okay,
No, I really forgive me, but I don't want to get into second referendum territory, not because I'm frightened of it, never had a problem in speaking out on Brexit. But it's just that I think at the moment, we don't need another referendum at the moment. I think our country has so many problems. The last thing we want is another referendum on the European Union. But on your real question, which was about Labour, it's not my job. I'm not a member of the Labour Party. No. I am a supporter of Keir Starmer's because I think he's honest, I think he's decent, and I think he's competent. Okay. And I think that's exactly what we need in number 10. But I agree with you. I am disappointed in Keir Starmer's stance on the EU, the single market, because we want honesty in all of this. Well, and one of the things that hacks me off is that there is no other example in British politics of where people who put forward a series of arguments that won a vote are not being held to account. The media is, with great exceptions and notable and honourable exceptions like your good selves, has largely ignored the elephant in the room, will not hold the Leave leaders, now the Conservative Party, on Brexit to account. And that is shameful and it's dangerous and it's anti-democratic. And Labour should be doing that job.
So the question that is actually forefront is why he has chosen to say he's going to make Brexit work. Is it a question that I've wrestled with this for a while. Is it a question you can actually avoid? I mean, I'm thinking there's ways you can shrug off the culture war, but he's put himself committed into that to some degree. If you're asked about Brexit and you're leader of the opposition, it's very difficult to sit on the fence. You have to come up with a view.
But the reality of it is that there are lots of your listeners who won't be ringing you up because they'll be sitting at home or in taxis and all over the other places that people listen to, and they'll be going, oh, God, you know what? I'm just so fed up with Brexit. And there was a real sense come 2019. Remember, I stood in that general election, knowing I'd lose, by the way. But I stood in that general election. And I can assure you, in my constituency, Jeremy Corbyn was the number one issue. People got how dangerous he would be if he were to be elected as our Prime Minister. But on Brexit, most people just fed up to the back teeth.
Even though it affects everything. This is the elephant in the room. You use the phrase, the listeners use it all the time. It affects everything we do.
I know it does. But because one of the things that I wanted to say, my fault, was that the people really behind Brexit I think there were some deep, very unpleasant forces behind it. But most of the people the leaders of the campaign were ideologically driven. Brexit consumed their lives. The EU consumed their lives. And they got their opportunity in that referendum, and nothing and no one was going to stop them. Remember, Matthew, as I know you and your listeners were, it was the first time that members of Parliament had their lives threatened, their families' lives threatened, women MPs were threatened with rape, not because they even were saying a second referendum. This was before any of that, but because they had the outrageous temerity to say, perhaps we should stay in the single market or a customs union. I'm voting for Brexit, which I did.
There was a lot of hate. It got to me.
But it was organised. It was organised, and it shut down the debate.
Without a doubt.
Shut up.
Without a debate.
And that continues. And you can understand why Keir Starmer is nervous, also knowing that in a lot of it, I know you want to say something, but in a lot of his key constituencies, which he has to win back in the so-called red wall, he knows that the majority of Labour voters in those constituencies voted for Brexit. So it's very difficult. But honesty.
Okay.
This country's crying out for honesty.
I'm intrigued by the notion of him trying to win back the former red wall, because looking at some of the data, it's about 20% of the votes that he lost there. But I'm thinking Brexit was a 50-50 issue for the country, and it's now potentially a 60-40 issue for the country, and he's on the wrong side there. But I'm going to get to that later in the programme. I'll love and leave you now, Anna, if I may, with one question. You've said you admire Keir Starmer. I think we both probably have the same view about his stance on Brexit. Would you vote for Labour? Or is Keir's stance on Brexit too problematic for you? It's problematic for me. I'll hold my hand up to that.
No, I don't. It will not stop me from supporting Keir Starmer being our next Prime Minister. I believe that. Oh yes. I've said it for a very long time. But Hey, I've said it on
even
your
though
show.
he's pro. I mean, even though he was anti-Brexit back in the day, he's now saying he's going to make it work.
Because our country, and this is the thing,
Anna, can it work? Can he make it work?
No. You can definitely do a better deal. And there are things that, you take the entertainment industry, you'll be familiar with this, Matthew. You know that people can't travel in the way that workers the way they did. They have to fill in carnets. These are forms that we used to fill in to take camera equipment and lighting and all the great, because we have that's just one little tiny example. You can make things better. That is true. But Keir Starmer offers to me what our country needs: honesty, decency, and all the rest of it. I will, like lots of people, vote to make sure that, well, I won't vote for a Trotskyist or a Corbynite, but I will vote to make sure that we have Keir Starmer in number 10 and we don't have the Conservatives in government anymore.
Anna
Because I'm afraid they are not fit to govern.
Anna Soubry, former Conservative minister, lest we forget, criminal barrister to boot. Very happy New Year to you. What an extraordinary revelation, and one that's left me ever so slightly confused, because one of the problems I would imagine for people who hate Brexit voting for Keir Starmer is that he's going to make it work, which I would suggest is going to be a problem for him electorally, but not for Anna Soubry.